Lots of news. Lots of news. Our latest West Ham players and managers catching coronavirus. And Reece Nelson could be on his way out the club in the form of a loan deal. We're going to discuss it all and get your thoughts in the live chat too. So let's crack on with it. Hello and welcome to the Gooner Talk. Back again with you guys for another show, for another episode of our Raw Reaction series, a show in which we react to the latest Arsenal news and everything that kind of relates to it, which at the moment is encompassing most of football right now. It's interesting to see what's going on in the football world because West Ham, currently playing tonight, have received information that Cullen and Diop and their manager David Moyes have tested positive for the coronavirus, which has meant they have, of course, gone straight home to self-isolate for what I believe is either 10 to 14 days. And it's kind of bringing into question with also the cup tie between Leyton Orient and Tottenham Hotspur being postponed, what football might look like once again in a couple of weeks' time. And of course, usually on the show, what we do is we can have a bit of a joke, we can have a bit of a laugh and joke around about stuff. But there are sometimes some things that you need to sit back and go, right, we need to think about this. We need to talk about this seriously and think, what actually are the repercussions of this going to be? How is the landscape of football going to change? If you think about people in the different positions that are involved with the game, that are freelance and looking into this and thinking, are we going to be going back into a period that could see no football being played for a significant period of time again? Now, I would say to people, don't panic yet, because things are different now. Things are very, very different. Darren Clifford says, give us some good news, Tom. Well, sorry to start the show off on the somber mode. Let's start with the serious stuff and then go into the more lighthearted transfer news in a little bit. But just to briefly kind of look into this, is that when Arteta first contracted COVID-19, way back, I believe it was in March, Arsenal were due to play Manchester City, and that game was postponed because our head coach at the time contracted COVID. And even though he was under the weather, it wasn't asymptomatic by any means. He was still fine and he recovered very, very quickly. At the time, we genuinely didn't really know anything about this virus, how it worked, how it would spread, what we needed to do to stop it. Now things are different. We are no closer to a vaccine, it seems. And although trials are going on, there are still reports going on that it could be a significant amount of time. Our leader, Prime Minister Boris Johnson, has come out and said that the new restrictions in the UK, which is about 6 people, it's about face coverings, could be in place for the next 6 months. How this will affect football is obviously it's different to how it would have affected it before. We are aware of the elite sports bubble that is currently in place within teams, and that means that all protocols are taken very seriously and players are kept within those bubbles, and so games can continue. Hence why Arsenal's response to the West Ham news is that they will continue as normal. They will have the test for their players. If their players come back as positive, those players will go into self-isolation. It will effectively be treated as an injury, like we see with some players that get a muscular injury or a dead leg and are out for a few days, possibly a week or so. But in this case, it will be 10 to 14 days. And when you're looking at sort of the situation that this leaves football in, is that there are going to be times when Arsenal and other teams are going to be without big players for big games because they would have contracted the virus. This virus is going to continue to spread. I mean, it's spreading more virulently right now because the R rating has gone above 1. There are many things that should be going on that aren't. There are many stricter restrictions that could be put in place that aren't right now. And there are lots of economic reasons as to why that is happening. But I just want to put it across that I just would like it to be that I don't want people to panic. Part of me saying this is trying to keep myself in a position where I don't want to panic as well. But at the same time, I think it is important to just try and stay calm. Let's not spread false information about this and just to genuinely discuss it in a professional and mature way about it. So let's talk about that and get your thoughts in regards to that news. Yannick Mack says they've got a bubble like NBA media would have a field day. Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not too in the know about the NBA stuff that's going on. Please feel free to educate me, Yannick. Max Casper says, I hope we can get Aouar. I've seen a lot of this guy, and I hope, and I get that he's very, very good. We will talk about Aouar in just a bit. I can see a lot of questions about Aouar already. Unbelievable stuff. We can't get away from transfers just for a second, can we? Half South African says, how is it fair for any team when one of their main first team players gets infected with COVID-19 before a game? The blunt answer to that, mate, is that it's arguably not fair. But unfortunately, everyone is in the position. Manchester City have seen Ilkay Gundogan get tested positive, and they will be without him for 2 weeks. You could argue, how is it fair that some players can go into a tackle, break someone's legs, put them out of action for 6 to 12 months, and that player that's done that gets 3-match ban or a 6-match ban or whatever for violent conduct, or they were out of control during the challenge. You would say that's quite unfair that this player is missing the rest of the season for something that someone else did. That's unfair, but things still carry on at the end of the day. So that's probably where that comes into it. Jared says, as far as fairness, it's the same as if a player had any other illness and had to miss a game. And I completely agree with that. Smaug Fireball says, how many positive cases are enough to cancel a game? I don't know. The situation between Spurs and Leyton Orient was that Spurs actually paid for the Leyton Orient players and staff to get tested. It is utterly unclear right now how many of those members of staff, playing or otherwise, actually have contracted COVID-19. But the difference between the Premier League and the EFL is that Premier League teams are mandatory. It is mandatory for those teams to be tested every single week. It is not mandatory at the moment for teams below the Premier League to be tested. So that will obviously have an impact on how the lower leagues deal with this situation. But Premier League teams are being tested every single week. And that's why Spurs decided to make sure that those Leyton Orient players were tested, so that would not impact on their bubble, because that would be a crossover of that situation. So for sure. Carl Helberg says, worried we may have players test positive. We can't go the next 2 weeks without Aouar or Xhaka. Again, at this moment in time, we just have to carry on as if it is normal. It is going to be treated as an injury. Yes, it will absolutely suck if one of those players tests positive and they can't play. But we deal with it. Everyone's in the same boat. Loads of teams are in the same situation that could lose a good player or an average player or whatever at any stage of the season. And we just have to move on. So let's not get ourselves bogged down with that information and just move on to the next bit of news. So there's your somber, serious chat about COVID-19 out the way. Make sure you drop a like on the video and subscribe to the channel if you're new around here. But let's go into our transfer stuff. So the first thing I want to stick with Arsenal, and that is the news around Reiss Nelson. The news coming out from David Ornstein most recently is that Arsenal have made Reiss Nelson available for a loan deal. That they feel that his time in the first team is going to be limited this season. Even with the prospect of Europa League football, etc., he will still find it hard. If we think about what position Reiss Nelson typically plays, it's on that right wing. And if you look at Arsenal's right wing right now, you could field 3 players, in my opinion, in front of Reiss Nelson. You've got Willian, who's currently seemingly number 1, Nicola Pepe in behind that as well. And then you've got Bukayo Saka, that when has played in a front 3, has typically played on that right-hand side. And when you're looking at, even with all the different competitions that we're in, I'm thinking, do we really have place for Reiss Nelson? And I probably don't think we do. So sending him on a loan is probably the right situation to be in right now. It gives him development time, it gives him playing time, and ultimately it doesn't harm his value. And that's important, because having signed a contract very recently and still with significant years left, what you don't want is a case where he sits on the bench or without game time. And when he does get game time, he's not when you've not played for quite a while, it is sometimes you're going to have a bad performance. And if you have that on a consistent basis, it's going to have an impact on your market value. So it's important that Reiss Nelson goes out, gets minutes, gets a higher value, develops. Maybe he comes back as a much better player and can fit into our first team. If not, we've actually increased his value by seeing him perform well, fingers crossed, in another location. MRT says, is there a sniffer Kieran Tierney? I think after West Ham, that for me has gone to the top of the list. Definitely so. And if you haven't already, what I would say is, could you please go on to the Twitter, which is at the Gooner Talk TV right there. I have retweeted an article that I wrote today for 101 Great Goals about the tactical impact of Tierney not being in the team. It took a lot of research and a lot of time to write it. So I'd appreciate if you could go on the channel, give it a share, give it a retweet, and give it a read, most importantly too. PC5354 says, no, keep Nelson as backup. Like you said, COVID could happen to anyone. Fantastic point is that we could suddenly be without players significantly, and we would need that backup. So it's a risk by sending him on loan, because you might end up in a position where you need Nelson to be coming in, and then you've already sent him on loan. Maybe the loan that we do have should have a clause in it where you can bring them back into the team, and maybe that would help us. Sabusiso says, I hope Nelson can go on loan to a Premier League team. It's interesting because there was rumours when it came back to Zaha, Zaha being linked to Arsenal hasn't happened before, has it? That he was sort of being made out to be a possible make weight in a deal that would see him go on loan for a season to cover that Zaha position. I still don't buy the Zaha stuff yet. I'm not denying that Arsenal don't have interest in him. Arsenal very clearly do have interest in Zaha. They have done for quite a while. But whether or not they can get him this summer in a situation where Arsenal's finances are so heavily restricted and so heavily focused on a midfield role, yeah, that's where I start to struggle with the idea of Wilfried Zaha coming in, even if it meant Reiss Nelson going in the opposite direction. Aaron B says, we already have a Kieran Tierney backup. It's Saka. He was arguably better than Kieran Tierney at right/wing back. I don't know about that. Kieran Tierney has arguably been our best player besides Aubameyang and Leno last season. So I'm not going to go as far to say that Saka was better than Tierney, because when Tierney was playing, I thought he was easily one of the best players, if not the best player on the pitch. So for me, I still think Tierney's better. I do think Saka can play as a wing-back, but the way that we're playing at the moment with this three-at-the-back system and Tierney playing at left centre-back, Saka playing at left wing-back does leave us quite exposed. It's something that I go into in the article, and I would happily prove it to you as well, that Saka does, when he moves up the pitch, he does get caught out a few times, and it leaves our backline very exposed. And actually, when we conceded the goal against West Ham, that came from a counter-attack where Saka and Bellerin as well were caught too far up the pitch, and it meant that the three at the back, even though they were there with Xhaka, had to retreat backwards because they didn't have the numbers to press and stop them from running at us. Because if they did press, if they did go in and miss a tackle, it would have left us even more exposed. Obviously, in the end, it meant that Kolasinac didn't get close enough to the cross to stop it, and they were able to get the ball into the box to score. But those two playing, Saka and Bellerin, in that formation can leave us exposed. And I'm hoping, praying, that against Liverpool, we do go back with Mainsley in that role. As Colin Addy says, Mainsley plays well at left wing back. I 100% agree with you. Giddy Plays says Saka also doesn't track his man properly. Just watch the Community Shield versus Liverpool. Max Casper says Saliba will probably start against Leicester and Liverpool. I don't think that's great. The kid is too young. Interesting. I think it's fine for him to play against Leicester. I think that's a really good opportunity to use the Frenchman. Against Liverpool, I agree with you, though, Max. I definitely think it's probably too soon for a guy that's not even turned 20 years old yet, not played a proper competitive game for Arsenal's senior team yet, to come in such a big game. There's a lot of pressure on him already. I just don't think I want to. I don't really want to have to deal with that issue if it comes to it. So let's go and look at our final story, which is regarding the good old man that is Houssem Aouar. Now, Houssem Aouar has, of course, been linked to Arsenal for a considerate amount of time now. And then more information came out from the Oracle, Mr. David Ornstein, regarding Lyon. And he says that Lyon are tough negotiators, especially their president, Olas. That could complicate things around Aouar. On the flip side to that, Edu has a very good relationship with Juninho, who is, I believe, their sporting director or head of football, or technical, one of those roles anyway. And Aouar is represented by the same agency as Mikel Arteta. So you've got those links there too. Some I speak to think it's more likely that they may end up with one of them rather than both of them. And to that extent, possibly more likely Thomas Partey, due to his release clause making it more clear-cut. Now, I don't know if you saw, and I put a tweet out about this, follow us at the Gooner TV, but you may have seen on Twitter yesterday some people coming out and saying that Arsenal have effectively wrapped up the deal for Aouar. I don't know if you saw it. It wasn't in the usual places. You had to dig a little bit deeper to some of the other accounts that were talking about it. But there were some rumours flying around that Aouar has supposedly wrapped up this deal to Arsenal. The terms are agreed. Arsenal and Lyon have come to an agreement. I don't know how genuine those thoughts are. If I did, I would give you an inkling. But the things that you've seen on Twitter is the things that have been said in other circles that I'm aware of, and I genuinely don't know how legitimate they are. You may have seen some people from other podcasts talking about it. Now, what I can say is that the people that are talking about it have the same information as the people that gave them the information about Gabriel signing well ahead of time. We talked about Lee Judge's yesterday's show. Lee Judge's told me and the guys on TGT in our WhatsApp group that Gabriel was going to be done well in advance of anything that came up big regarding Gabriel. And it is that same source that has told those people that that Aouar supposedly is there. So they're not my words. I'm just feeding you through words of what I've heard from the likes of Lee and some other people as well. That is out there in social media. So I mean, it's not like I'm breaking any rules there. It is there. Those people have said it on social media. So there you've got it. But whether you want to believe that is completely up to you. And if you want to take it with a grain of salt, I would definitely encourage you to do that. In regards to whether this deal will happen, and in my opinion and my thoughts around the Aouar situation, I think it is very likely that Arsenal can achieve either one of Aouar or Partey this summer. The idea of doing both, and even the idea of Zaha coming into the thinking, I think is utterly a dream situation. It's not barbaric, but it's fantasy to think that Arsenal could do all three of those deals. If they managed to do those three deals, it would be immense. It would be unreal levels of confidence and, I mean, ruthlessness really in the transfer market to achieve that. Even two of them, I think, would be absolute fantasy in this window. But I do think that it's likely that one of those two will happen this summer. As we've said, and as I've maintained week upon week on this show, Arsenal need to sell players in order to buy. We've begun to do that. Emi Martinez is no longer an Arsenal player. Arsenal gained about £70 million up front-ish around that mark from that deal, which can go straight into it. We've spent £1 million of that-ish around that mark on Runnison, who came in to be backup and who actually we could even see feature against Leicester tomorrow, which could be a little bit exciting to see a new player in an Arsenal shirt, new toys and all that. But also, Arsenal are looking to move on the likes of Lucas Torreira to Atletico Madrid, whether or not that is in the form of a loan with an obligation to buy, or whether it's in the form of a loan with an option, which to me makes no sense, or whether it's a permanent deal. What is very obvious is that Atletico's interest does mean that other clubs like Torino, for instance, have had to step up any interest that they have in that player. The complication is that, say, Arsenal want to go for Partey, and there's a small chance, because of the good relationship between the two clubs, that Partey could be let go for slightly less, or there could be an agreement made between the clubs which involve Torreira and Partey. If Arsenal were to go to Torino and say, look, Atletico have given this offer, this is the situation. If you come in with more money up front, we would be willing to accept that. And then they would go back to Atletico and say, well, they've said this. Are you going to do that? Atletico will probably go, no, because Atletico's financial situation is horrific. It is really, really bad. Hence why they need to sell players before they can buy, and they don't want to sell Thomas Partey. But they're looking at players like Torreira that could be available on a cut price deal. They're looking at players like Marc Roca that has been obviously relegated from Espanyol this season and is available for much, much less than Marc Roca's €40 million buyout clause. Is around 10 to 15 million pounds. That's how much of a cut Marc Roca's gone through. So there's lots of things up in the air regarding either Aouar or Partey. The issue is that then you come down to which one is the better one to go for. You know my opinion. Thomas Partey would transform the midfield of Arsenal. I get that Arsenal needs central creativity. I've written about it. I've done tactical breakdowns on it. I get how much Aouar would help this team. But the biggest thing and the biggest difference between Thomas Partey and Houssem Aouar is not only age and being able to play in your prime years, but the key words, and you can go to any French expert on football, and I guarantee you that most of them, if not all of them, will support me on this point, because Jeremy Smith has told me, I've spoken to other French football experts about this, but consistency is the key. Houssem Aouar's consistency in Liga, whilst has shown flashes of brilliance in games of absolute world-class talent, look at the Manchester City game, for instance, that was great, but consistency, Aouar still hasn't quite took that yet. He hasn't quite performed at his highest level consistently across many, many games. You take that in comparison to Thomas Partey. When you watch Thomas Partey, what you see is what you get. You get a guy that can take the ball from deeper ends of the pitch, drive it up the pitch, beat opposition players' press. How many times did West Ham pin us back and we struggled to get out of their press so many times last weekend? I always use the example of Leicester at home last season, where Leicester pinned us back when we were 1-0 up, and eventually the pressure told. Thomas Partey is a player that will enable you to break out of that high press. And not only that, he's someone that's a really good tackler, someone that's a really good physical presence. But not only that, is that Thomas Partey is an intelligent player that knows what to do, that knows the right pass. Aouar needs to master consistency. And I'm not saying that Aouar isn't an amazing player, but Partey transforms Arsenal's midfield and makes it a lot better than what Aouar would to this midfield. So I think that's some information that you should genuinely take away. I get the idea and the excitement around a young 22-year-old Frenchman that could really excite things in the future. If you want to look at Arsenal right now and know what they need, Arsenal don't need someone that's going to be amazing in the future. And I'm not saying that Aouar wouldn't be amazing right now, but if you're talking about guaranteed wins and looking at the sort of the positives that a player would bring, is much, much, much more likely. I'm not going to say it's guaranteed because that would be ridiculous. But it's much, much, much more likely to see a Thomas Partey come in and play much, much better on a consistent basis in a much more important position for Arsenal than Houssem Aouar would. Now, fingers crossed, we can do both and they can play together in a midfield with Xhaka. For me, dream scenario, Xhaka, Partey, Aouar in a midfield is amazing. But whether or not that happens, we're just going to have to wait and see. Before we wrap things up, let's go through some of your comments. The Real Janice says, Tom, you should get Matt Spiral on to speak about Aouar. It's a good shout. I will send him a message. Or why don't you guys bombard him? Let's do it Partey style. Matt Sparrow, come on the Arsenal, come on the Tuna Talk, come and talk about it. Carl Halberg says, Aouar first and Partey on deadline day. Madness incoming. The difference is, Carl, with these two is that obviously it's easier to do the Partey deal because he's got a release clause. It can be done whenever. Arsenal could activate it on the last day of the could do that. I hope they don't because it's important to maintain good relationships between the teams. And that would really kind of mess up Arsenal's relationship with Atletico if we ever wanted to do business in the future. But sometimes you do have to put the good of the team first, and maybe that's the case. But it's more likely Aouar could come in first because the situation with Partey means that you could do that deal at any point. Giddy Plays says, Aouar won't solve our creative problems. He sucks against low blocks, but he's great on the counter. He is much better against, say, a team that pushes further up the pitch. And I also think that there is the scope for Aouar to be a good player within those low blocks, but it is a weak point. And I get what you're saying, Giddy, 100%. Aouar is much, much better on a team that can hit teams on the break. He'd be great for that. The low block thing is still in question. And maybe that's why a Partey should be prioritized. Yonic Max says, I think... and then he's used the wrong word, are holding out to get Torreira plus 35 million euros. They're going to try to bump us, and I'm all for it if we just get Partey. Hovik reckons that he wants Partey over Aouar. Zamir says, Joboslai over Aouar. Who is Partey that we could get? I mean, yeah, who is the guy that's better than Partey that we could get? And the answer to that is no one. I think that's kind of the point that you're making, is that you could wait a year, get an arguably cheaper, better prospect in Dominic Joboslai compared to Aouar. But who are you going to get that's better than Partey? Who are you going to get that can do the job that Partey can? And the answer is no one. In my mind, there is no one better in European football right now at doing what Thomas Partey does, which is why it amazes me. It doesn't amaze me because a lot of big teams have got their midfields kind of sorted right now. But it amazes me that maybe no one else has kind of thought, wow, in this market of COVID, we can get a player on the cheap like Partey. I think that's big, and I think that's a really important point to bring up. That's where we're going to finish the show today. Thank you ever so much for tuning in. I can't wait to share some really exciting news with you next week. Members, I should say, it's the 22nd of September, and members are still turning around and thinking, where's our expert interview? Where's our Plus members interview? There is reasons behind that, and I can go into that tomorrow, and it's kind of partly to do with the announcement, which I'm going to probably tell you about tomorrow. As to why I've been unable to do that stuff right now. But don't worry, because things on the channel are going to be stepping up and are able to be stepped up very, very soon. And I'm very excited to talk to you about that. I know I've kept you on kind of tenterhooks about this news for quite a while. Some people are now more in the know than they were before. But it's it's going to be an exciting time. I'd appreciate those people that do know, just for very about 24 hours, if that, and I can talk to you some more about it. Please drop a like on the video. Please subscribe to the channel if you're new around here. Please give a big shout out to all of our expert members. They are amazing and they keep this channel going. And I can tell you in the next couple of months, next couple of years, these guys are going to be really integral into how this channel evolves and moves forward. So I have absolutely no bad words at all to say about these guys. Thank you ever so much for your support. Thank you, of course, to all of our regular TGT members and our Plus members as well. If you would like to get access to exclusive content, I promise that is coming for the content. And of course, if you want to throw out and stand out in the chat box, you can do that as well. No, Winston, I am not pregnant. I'm not, I'm afraid. I can't announce that yet. You never know. Technology is advancing all the time. But no. But yeah, it's exciting stuff. So I can't wait to talk to you about that. But yeah, thank you to the expert members. And thank you if you would like to get more content. And actually, members, you're going to be getting some fun stuff soon to use in the chat box, which I'm really excited about, actually. I've got some designs back and they're quite fun. So you may have seen me tweet about it recently. But yeah, it's really exciting. Really looking forward to doing it with you guys. And I will see you again very soon. Drop a like, subscribe to the channel, hit that notification bell, even though it never tells you when you get notifications for some reason. But other than that, it's been a pleasure to speak to you, as it always is. And as always, up the Arsenal.